My enemies are many. My equals are none. In the shade of olive trees, they said Italy could never be conquered. In the land of pharaohs and kings, they said Egypt could never be humbled. In the realm of forest and snow, they said Russia could never be tamed. Now they say nothing. They fear me, like a force of nature, a dealer in thunder and death. I say, I am Napoleon. I am Emperor.
On June 18, 1815, the Duke of Wellington and his army of 68,000 British and Allied men faced Napoleon Bonaparte's French veteran forces of 72,000 near the town of Waterloo in present-day Belgium. On Wellington's right flank lay the strategic farmhouse of Hougoumont. At his center was La Haye-Sainte. And at his left was Papelotte. Napoleon was more or less confident he could defeat the British. He just hoped that the Prussian army, led by General Blücher, whom he had defeated prior to this battle, would not rendezvous with Wellington. In order to prevent this, Napoleon sent out a fraction of his army to chase down and finish the retreating Prussians. Because communications were poor between the two armies, Napoleon could not be sure whether or not his men have caught up with Blücher. The fighting started when the French began bombarding Allied forces. Napoleon had much more superior artillery than Wellington, thus his cannons dealt massive casualties to Wellington's troops. The two sides traded fire for a while before Michel Ney, the French general, ordered infantry to begin attacking the British left flank. After some time, Napoleon saw that Wellington's center, due to its heavy exposure to artillery, was much weaker than his other flanks, and ordered his linemen to attack it. Wellington knew there was little hope for his poorly equipped forces to defeat Napoleon, and throughout the battle was worried about whether or not Blücher would arrive to his aid.
Running for them.
Both La Haye-Sainte and Hougoumont were attacked by waves of French troops in a desperate attempt to dislodge the entrenched Allies from their fortified positions.
running, sir.
Although Wellington repelled the attacks at Hougoumont, his lines were becoming increasingly weakened, especially at his center.
Our men are running, sir.
Then, finally, after hours of fighting, La Haye-Sainte was captured by the French. With this conquest, Napoleon thought the British center was bound to break, but still the Allied troops held their positions. About midway into the battle, an unknown army was spotted approaching Napoleon's south flank. Wellington prayed that it was the Prussians, but for all he knew it could be French reinforcements. Regardless, this army was advancing slowly and would take a while before it reached the battlefield.
Our men are running, sir. Line infantry! Infantry!
Napoleon's artillery was so deadly for the Allied troops that Wellington ordered his center to pull back 100 paces. Thinking the British were retreating, Michel Ney ordered an all-out cavalry charge at the center. He thought this would ultimately break Wellington's center position, causing the Allied army to break and eventually fall apart in the confusion. Wellington, however, ordered his troops to hold their position and form defensive squares. These squares were designed to defend infantry against cavalry charges. The men would move into a square formation and thrust out their bayonets so it would look like the horses were charging into a wall of spears. The thought was based behind simple horse psychology, for a horse would be very unlikely to charge against rows of bayonets. This tactic worked very effectively against Ney's cavalry. Almost every single man deployed in that attack was killed or wounded in one of the most disastrous charges in history. General Michel Ney barely escaped with his life, with the center still under Wellington's control. Napoleon, due to health complications, was not on the battlefield when Ney gave the cavalry the order to charge. When he returned, he found his entire cavalry in shambles and a British center still intact. Napoleon was outraged at Ney for making this decision while he was absent, but still they both knew that the British line was very close to cracking. The French Old Guard had never failed him before. These men were veterans of the Napoleonic Wars in the beginning. They traveled with him from the olive trees of Italy to the deserts of Egypt to the snow-capped forests of Russia. They have never retreated nor surrendered. They have never given up or refused an order. If there was anyone left to win this battle for France, Napoleon knew it had to be the Old Guard. Upon seeing the Old Guard approach, the British were struck with fear. Wellington had to make a quick decision before they arrived at his center. After some thought, Wellington gave a surprising order. He commanded one of the line infantry regiments to move back behind the ridge protecting his center. Once the Old Guard were engaged in combat with the center troops, they quickly gained the advantage.
Our men are running, sir.
Wellington waited for his troops to be firmly engaged with the French before unleashing his deadly surprise. A fresh regiment of linemen charged from over the ridge and smashed into the Old Guard. Within mere minutes of this deadly encounter, the legendary Old Guard broke off and ran. And then finally, after waiting for so long, the mysterious army that was approaching revealed itself. The Prussians had arrived. Not only that, but they had come at the exact time Wellington needed to deliver a final killing blow to Napoleon. With the Prussians approaching from Napoleon's south, he he was forced to commit the remainder of his troops there instead of following up his attack on the center.
Imbécile!
Wellington now knew the battle was totally in his favor. As he finished off the last of the old guard, he gave all his units the order to charge at the French lines. It was a glorious moment for the Allies. They had held their lines for the longest time until the Prussian reinforcements could arrive. They would now have their chance to once and for all finish the hated French Emperor and his infamous army. As the British advanced, Napoleon knew he was finished. His dreams of a lasting French Empire were crushed right then and there. He could not bear to witness the defeat of his army and his final surrender, so he ordered the French artillery to continue firing and load canister shots, which were essentially shotgun shells, even though resistance was pointless. Once the British troops smashed into French lines, Napoleon quickly gave command to his few remaining officers and fled the battlefield. Meanwhile, on the French south flank, Napoleon's last troops were desperately trying to fend off the advancing Prussians. Little did they know, however, that their general had fled and the British were already finishing off the French artillery and commanding officers. Soon, they would be completely surrounded and forced to surrender or die fighting.
We have killed their general, sir. Now they've lost break.
Within minutes, the last of the French officers were killed, and a glorious British victory was within sight. After regrouping, the British cavalry charged the remaining Frenchmen. The last French troops were too busy handling the Prussians to fear the British soldiers that attacked from behind. The results were devastating. It didn't take long before all French troops either fled, surrendered, or perished on the battlefield. The day was won for Wellington. He had once and for all defeated the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte.